Welcome to VRIC Media, the most trusted voice in junior mining. My guest today is the legendary Bob Moriarty of 321 Gold. And we had a ton of fun today, long form episode. We covered a lot of ground. I'm not going to lie. Whenever I have Bob on, I get a bit worried about publishing because we press into the pointy edges of subject matter. So please, before you watch this episode, say a little prayer for me to the YouTube gods. Keep my channel safe. Keep me online. Here is Bob Moriarty, and enjoy this one.
All right, we're going to get rolling.
They helped create an economy that was completely addicted to cheap money.
You need to buy savings bonds or something. You need to be way, way, way out of this space.
I subscribe to Miss Piggy's rule of money management. Always manage to have more money, you know what I mean?
It wasn't but 2 years ago that everybody was saying China's economy was going to be bigger than that of the United States. It's gone in the exact opposite direction.
So we're going to jump right in.
All right, here I am with Bob Moriarty. Bob, it's great to have you back in the program and really good to see you.
You certainly picked an interesting time. The next 2 weeks are going to be momentous.
Momentous. And you said before we jumped into the recording here that they will be potentially the most dangerous time in history. That's a bold statement. So I gotta pull on that thread a little bit and let's unpack that.
Okay. Zelensky has lost the war in Ukraine and he doesn't want to admit it. So he's going to do whatever he has to do to try to get the United States involved. Zelensky literally wants the United States to fight the war for him. Exactly the same thing is true in Israel. Israel has said literally today that the strike is going to be a lot more severe than they had been threatening. So you've got potentially World War III in Ukraine. You've got World War III in Israel. Israel is bombing banks in Beirut. Frankly, I have never read in any history book anyone suggesting that bombing banks was an effective weapon in war. So you've got some really strange things going. Everybody's been very quiet about the Houthis, but the Houthis keep sinking ships. Israel's made a big thing of a drone attack on Bibi Netanyahu's house, but what they have not mentioned, and everyone should be aware of, is the drone was launched from an IDF position. So it was a false flag operation that Israel is using as justification for a war against Iran. And I believe, and it's just my opinion, I believe Israel has always wanted to use nukes. And here's where it gets really scary. Russia said, first of all, don't do it. And they've said, if Iran is attacked, we will defend them. China has said, don't do it. If Iran is attacked, we will defend them. So you have literally all the makings for World War III on two different fronts. And then you got the bizarre situation of 2 weeks to the election. And the Democrats, frankly, are terrified. They cannot afford to have Donald Trump elected president, or there will be a number of DOJ, CIA, FBI, Hillary Clinton people going to jail. So when I say this is the most dangerous period in history, I don't think I'm going to have any problem with that being correct.
Okay, I want to pick this apart one by one. So actually, let's start with Israel and the false flag operation and your statement that Israel might be looking for a reason to use tactical nukes, if I understood that correctly.
Yes.
And immediately I thought,
well,
if there
maybe
is
not
one
even
country,
tactical nukes. Okay, tactical nukes are what you use against a battalion or a division. They're talking literally about destroying Beirut, destroying Damascus, and Tehran. And in a cabinet meeting today in Israel, they were saying we need a decapitation event. We need to go after their legislature and their leaders. And of course, that's totally illegal by all the rules of international warfare, but Israel doesn't care.
Okay, so yes, I suggested tactical because maybe that was just my hope. You're suggesting otherwise. I have to think if there is one country in the world that is positioned most poorly to engage in that kind of warfare, it is the country that is surrounded by hostile nations who already have weapons aimed at them, and that's Israel. And I just think in this scenario where they pull that trigger, their days have to be numbered.
What do you say? They're surrounded by nations with weapons aimed at them?
Israel is surrounded by hostile nations.
No.
Yeah.
No. It's exactly the opposite. Israel has threatened Syria and attacked them. They've threatened Lebanon and attacked them. They've threatened Iran and attacked them. I don't think they've attacked Egypt just yet, but that's next on the list. They're literally talking about the Greater Israel project, which involves taking land from Syria, taking land from Lebanon, taking land from Turkey, taking land from Egypt, taking land from Saudi Arabia. Israel is being run by insane people, and they're going to destroy themselves because they have brought God into the equation. When somebody starts saying we can do anything we want because God is on our side, you know you're dealing with an idiot.
Well, okay, yeah, I'm not arguing that they're not the provocateur, but be that as it may, they're surrounded by enemies.
Yeah,
maybe enemies they made.
Hang on a second. How did they become enemies? If you go back to the Iran-Contra affair, Iran and Israel were in bed together, okay? Iran was under sanctions. They wanted replacement parts for their aircraft. They went to Israel. Israel scammed the United States. Israel has had enemies for the last 100 years, but Israel created those enemies. There was peace in the Middle East between Christian, Jews, and Muslims for 1,000 years until the Zionists showed up in 1890 or so, and it's been constant warfare for the last 80 years. But you've got to identify who the aggressor is and who the victim. Bibi Netanyahu's a master at playing the victim, but that drone was launched by the IDF. It was not launched by Hezbollah.
Okay, so what I'm saying though is in the event. So yes, history. I'm not debating who the aggressor was, who the instigator was, the provocateur, what's justified, what's not. What I am saying is that if Israel were to pull the trigger on something so cataclysmic as a nuclear event on one of its neighbors, it strikes me as almost like a suicide by cop scenario. Where you're surrounded and you pull out the firearm and immediately you're wiped out. Now,
well, let me give you some numbers. It is roughly accurate to say the population of Iran is 10 times bigger than that of Israel. You could bring Syria, you could bring Lebanon, you could bring Egypt into the equation, but it's meaningless. Iran's got 10 times many people. It's got 74 times as much land area. Now, as a guy who is in combat, I'll tell you, Israel would make a really easy target and Iran would make a really difficult target. So when you talk about suicide by cop, I believe Israel is committing suicide, and I have no problem whatsoever for saying that, okay? Now, you could say that's a good thing or it's a bad thing, but Israel is committing suicide because they're saying our fingernails are worth the lives of 1,000 Arabs. And anyone who uses that kind of logic is going to destroy himself.
Okay. So we're actually very aligned on that scenario. Do you think that Netanyahu sees it that way? And if he does, is there some bigger spiritual end of days incentive for him? Or do you think he doesn't see it that way at all? And in fact, this is a battle he can start, maintain, and win with or without the help of foreign allies. But how do you think he sees it?
You're like this. Bibi Netanyahu has exactly the same objective as Joe Biden. Do you have any idea what that is? Bibi Netanyahu, I'm not talking about Zionists, I'm not talking about Jews, I'm not talking about Israel. Bibi Netanyahu and Joe Biden have exactly the same goal. What is it?
Keep their family out of prison? I don't know.
Duh. Okay. Here's the problem with Bibi Netanyahu. Everyone in Israel, certainly I believe that he's been guilty of corruption. But as long as he's prime minister, he cannot be brought to trial.
Oh.
As long as Joe Biden is president. And one thing, I hate people using the word guarantee, but I'm going to guarantee between now and January 20th, the Biden crime family is going to be given presidential pardon. Bibi Netanyahu doesn't give a shit about Hamas. He doesn't give a shit about the hostages. He doesn't give a shit about Hezbollah. He gives a shit about where the striped outfit.
Okay.
This
so that is it. Interesting.
This whole thing is about keeping him out of jail. And that's obscene. Why would you risk World War III and the deaths of billions of people when you're that corrupt?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and it speaks a lot to the type of people that run for the highest positions in office. I mean, a little bit. That's where I go anyways. It's like, what kind of person?
Here's the problem. They're all corrupt. Okay. Some of them are just more corrupt than others. I think a number that I would accept is that the Biden crime family has taken about $50 million in bribes. I mean, that was even bigger than Hillary Clinton.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a funny thing to hear that statement. The Biden family's taken over 50. Did you say billion with a B?
No, million.
Million. Yeah. There we go. In bribes. And a lot of people would get their back up and say, there's no way, this is America, et cetera, as if we've departed human nature, at this point in our journey of civilization. Of course, we haven't. People are still governed by, greed and fear and the same things we always have been. So, of course, those in office succumb to those. Okay, so I want to pivot over to. Do I want to do this? Yeah. Let's look at Europe. You started there. Zelensky's already lost the war. What does that mean, Bob? To say Zelensky's already lost the war? He's making ground in Kursk. But what's your take on what's occurring?
Here's the scenario. On December 21st of 2021, Putin told NATO, the EU, and the United States, we demand secure borders. This, of course, is exactly what John F. Kennedy demanded of the USSR in November of 1962. Putin was totally ignored. Okay, so the real start of the war was not February 24th. The real start of the war was December 21st of the prior year. So we've got December 21st, and then we've got the invasion on February 24th. But what happened in Turkey in March? There was a peace agreement, and the Ukrainians actually signed the document and agreed to freeze everything in place, and they would actually enforce the Minsk II agreement that they had made in 2016. Now, what caused the war? And 90% of brainwashed Americans will tell you Putin invaded Ukraine. And they totally ignore the fact that the United States invaded Ukraine in 2016 or 2014 and put in an illegal government. They overthrew the democratically elected government. And before that, 30 years before, when they were talking about the reunification of Germany, the United States put in writing, we will not expand NATO 1 inch to the east. Well, 15 countries later, okay, the Russians finally woke up and said, you know, the United States is a bunch of liars. So after the $5 billion coup in 2014, the Ukrainian government started shelling the Donbass region, which wanted to separate. Donbass actually wanted to join Russia the way Crimea did. And Russia said, no, we don't want to do that. You're Ukrainian. France, Germany, and the UK agreed in the Minsk II agreement to freeze everything in place, stop attacking Donbass, stop killing 14,000 people, and hold free elections. But Germany, France, and the UK now admit we were lying. We just wanted to give Ukraine time to build up. And in the incredible insanity of NATO, they thought we're so big and we're so powerful, we cannot be defeated. Well, they were defeated, and they were defeated in the first month. But then Boris Johnson goes over there, and Boris Johnson said, "No, you want to keep fighting. You could steal a lot more money." Well, that was $240 billion ago. Okay, that was 1 million dead Ukrainian soldiers. Okay, Zelensky is not president of Ukraine. Are you aware of that?
Well, I'm aware that he postponed a somewhat mandatory election.
No, his time was up in April. Okay, he can run around in his little brown T-shirt and pretend he's a head guy, but the fact is his term was up in April. Now, whether there's another election or not, it's a totally different issue. But we got this situation where Ukraine has consistently lost. They cannot defeat Russia. Anyone who understands anything about conflict, Ukraine's a small country. Russia's a big country, okay? Russia has defeated Ukraine right from the very beginning. And now Putin said, look, I mean, we were nice guys before and we would have talked, and we're not going to do that. Now you're trying to invade Russia. You're trying to launch these long-range missiles into Russia. And should you do that, we are going to hold the people who have the satellites and the men who are actually launching those. We're going to hold you responsible. So if it's Germany, we'll attack Germany. If it's France, we'll attack France. If the United States, we'll attack the United States. Now, here's the central problem nobody you know has ever talked about. What does NATO stand to gain by defeating Russia? What does the United States stand to gain by defeating Russia? And the answer is nothing. We're fighting the dumbest war in all of recorded history, where if you win, you don't even get a Cupid doll.
Quick break here. This episode is brought to you by West Red Lake Gold Mines. Now, if you know nothing about West Red Lake Gold Mines, let me tell you one thing. This company was founded on the back of a transaction where they purchased the Madsen mine in northwestern Ontario in an area called the Red Lake Gold District, which to date has produced around 30 million ounces of gold from some of the richest gold deposits in the world. Now, what they paid for this mine versus what they got has led legendary mining entrepreneur Frank Giustra to call this transaction the deal of the decade. And Bob Moriarty, founder of 321 Gold, was recently on my show calling West Red Lake Gold Mines one of the two most undervalued gold companies in Canada. If you're curious why these individuals are so excited about West Red Lake Gold Mines, hit the link below to learn more. Now back to the episode. So when you hear President Trump say if he is reelected, he will end that conflict in a day, how do you interpret a statement like that?
Well, the man say he's an opera singer, and he's far better at opera than he is at international politics. Do you know why I said he was an opera singer?
No.
Because every word out of his mouth is me, 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 me. Donald Trump was a draft dodger. We're about the same age. He could have joined the military and served in Vietnam if he had wanted to. I did. He didn't. He doesn't know shit about the military.
Okay. What is... So look, Bob, I have a lot of folks on this show who are, one step away from American establishment figures, former CIA directors, Elbridge Colby, the book behind me there, he was the deputy assistant to the Secretary of Defense, wrote the National Defense Strategy for the White House in 2018. All these individuals say that the main focus inside the White House is China, the Pacific. That's what everybody's looking at, right? This is the biggest threats is China. Why dilute, if that's true, why is attention and resources being diluted to the extent that they are? You just said there's nothing to be gained in a Russian defeat. So, Senator Lindsey Graham will come out and say, it's the natural resource wealth. There's trillions of dollars of natural resources under the ground in Ukraine. We can't let that fall into Russian hands.
Well, that's stupid. Russia has lots of natural resources. They don't need Ukraine. Blinken said it best. He said, don't even worry about all this money that we're spending on weapons, because 90% of it comes back to the United States to provide well-paying jobs for Americans. And while that's true, it ignores the issue of where did the money come from in the first place, and the money came from the taxpayers in the first place. The military-industrial complex has been running this country since World War II. MacArthur warned us about it. Eisenhower did even a better job of warning us about it. And the military-industrial complex in the deep state is running the country, and they're running it right straight into the ground. The United States is a corrupt, decaying end of empire scenario. If you want to see what's going to happen, read Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, because everything that happened back then, including assassinations, is happening now. Hillary Clinton has had 79 acquaintances commit suicide.
Right. The Clinton list. And yes, I have not read that book about the Roman Empire, but you could find similar blueprints in the sunset years of the British Empire and their military industrial complex, and the Dutch Empire, who kind of invented the modern structure of the military industrial complex, as far as I understand, with the Dutch East India Company and the private military to, assist on global conquest. And send their ships out, meet new lands, meet new people, take their stuff, come home. That was the model that the Dutch really pioneered, and it's worked so well that we still do that today to a very large extent. But it always eventually runs off the road, which we're seeing now.
Exactly.
Okay, so we did a shallow dive into Ukraine and Israel, but where I want to tie this back to now, Bob, is the next 2 weeks being the most dangerous time in history. So what's the relationship there? Because we have an American election. We're going to publish this really quick. So today is October 21st for context, but it'll be live by October 23rd. And there's a very big election coming up in the United States. I can't imagine either side will concede. I can't really see that scenario. Hopefully I'm wrong. But how does that tie to the supreme and historic danger that you see that would have to come from one of these conflicts overseas?
Well, that's a really good question. Are you familiar with the concept of the butterfly effect?
Yeah.
Okay.
Butterfly.
If you understand that, a butterfly flapping its wings in Mexico can cause a typhoon in Hong Kong. Okay, and when you work the whole thing out, you realize that makes a lot of sense. What we have now is something I have never seen before. There are so many black swans. We've got Ukraine. We've got Gaza. We've got Lebanon. We've got Syria. We've got Iraq. We've got Iran. We've got China. We've got Russia. We've got the Houthis. We've got Israel, certainly. We've got Taiwan. We've got North Korea. And you have all these people, most of whom are damn fools, okay, thinking they're moving their agenda forward. But there are so many different agendas and they're conflicting. We have American representatives in the United States saying, we don't care if Donald Trump gets elected because the election results get certified on January 6th. Now, do you have any idea of who the government official is that has to certify Donald Trump's election?
Would it be the vice president? I actually don't know.
That would be the vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris. And if she does not certify the election results, the election gets tossed into the House of Representatives. So we have so many things that could go wrong. I'm not saying they're going to. I mean, the really strange thing is, I'm not warning and saying, I think we're going to have World War III. I'm saying we have the potential of World War III. We have it potentially started in Ukraine. We've got potentially started in Iran. We've got it potentially started in Beirut. We've got it potentially started in Israel. We have so many conflicting agendas that bad things are going to happen, and they're going to happen before the election. And we haven't even talked about 13 million illegal immigrants. I saw the greatest interview that I've ever seen the other day. J.D. Vance is being interviewed by CNBC or Fox or somebody. And the woman says, well, you're so concerned about these gangs taking over apartment buildings in Aurora. There's not that many buildings they took over. And J.D. Vance said, are you kidding? Listen to yourself. Yeah. These are criminal gangs that have taken over towns in the United States. And the beauty is, I don't want to remember what the number was, but it was something like 30,000 convicted murderers, or 15,000 convicted murderers and 30,000 convicted rapists released into the United States. Now, people think they're going to go join the Boy Scouts.
Right. Yeah, it's a funny scenario. Okay, so you could look at that. You could look at that situation, Bob, and say immigration's been a voting strategy to keep a certain party in power for thousands of years. The Romans did that very effectively, right? They would grant citizenship when convenient.
Absolutely good analogy. Your analogy about the Dutch, okay, and the Dutch East India Company Absolutely correct. We are repeating what has happened dozens of times in the past. And the scary thing is they all end up the same way. Now, do I believe, I'm not saying it's true, do I believe 13 million illegal immigrants were brought into the United States so they could vote for the Democrats? Of course. We have a massive hurricane hits western North Carolina. Asheville has been destroyed. Thousands of people have lost their lives, and the government doesn't even have the guts to tell us. And FEMA says, hate to say this, it's first week in October, and the fiscal year starts the 1st of October, but we haven't got any money. We gave it all to the illegal immigrants. And I went, what?
Yeah, and I was shocked just in general. I felt coverage of that event was very light, given the scope. I've got family in North Carolina and in Florida, and a good buddy of mine lost his house in St. Petersburg.
Yeah, but
he was up here
in Florida expects to get hit by hurricanes because the hurricanes go right through there. I've been to Asheville. Yeah. I got friends in Asheville. I never realized that the same thing happened in 1916. I didn't realize this, but there have been 2 hurricanes this year and in 1916 with equal devastation. But thousands of people have died in North Carolina, and they died because FEMA spent all the money.
What is your? Do you think I'm being sensational when I say I can't see either party ceding the election, right? Conceding defeat in the upcoming election. And I don't know how to, it's kind of a wait and see scenario. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And generally, when everybody's expecting the same thing, that's not the thing that happens, right? I mean, the nature of black swan events is that they catch us off guard.
Your gut feel is very accurate. And the term for that is called civil war.
Right.
And are all the pieces in play for civil war? Of course. Texas has 500,000 illegal immigrants on the voting rolls. 500,000, one state. It's end of empire. And, do we go down with the bang or do we go down with the flash?
It's end of empire. So, I had a guest on this morning, Bob, and we were walking through, he's a professor of Ukrainian history at Harvard, of all things. And we were chatting about the European front. And he was describing this recent surge of conflicts as Russia's final stand against the declining declining age of land empires, meaning that Russia is the final land empire still standing today. And he kind of walked through comparative nations we've seen come and go now, and this is the final rebellion against the crash of the last land empire. Does that make sense to you?
No.
And just as you, no,
it's stupid. Okay. Putin has said the same thing again and again and again. We have no territorial ambitions. The fall of the USSR was a tragedy. However, it would be a far bigger tragedy to try to recreate the USSR. Poland has said that Russia should be broken up into 100 pieces. Now, if you're running Russia and your next door neighbor says you should be broken into 100 pieces, you realize who the aggressor is. I mean, Putin is the only leader in the world that I could say is trying to take care of his people. Okay, we got this bizarre situation in the United States. We have exported our entire manufacturing to China, and then we turn around and say, well, China's the enemy. Well, damn, China's the enemy because you sent all your manufacturing to China to increase profits on a temporary basis. The United States has committed suicide through sheer stupidity, okay, with no benefits whatsoever. We want short-term benefits because the leaders of our corporations get benefits if the stock prices go up. So we've destroyed our economy. We have a service economy. What happens when people can't afford things anymore?
So you could make an argument, though, just to like steelman that a bit, that Poland to come out and say that Russia should be broken up into 100 little pieces. Is Poland taking care of their people? I mean, Poland's been invaded and occupied more than any country in Europe, and as a consequence,
they didn't get invaded by
have the largest.
Okay,
not yet, but just to say,
some of the most intelligent friends I got say Putin's a monster. He wants to recreate the USSR. He's going to invade Europe. And here we are 2.5 years into the war. He hadn't done any of that. And he said, look, here's what we want. We want secure borders. Russia and Putin did not start this war. The United States and NATO started this war. Putin and China were saying we need to talk peace. Name one official in NATO and the United States who said anything about peace. And the answer is zero. None of them. And they're talking about increasing the aggressive behavior. Now, if you're in Russia and they fire a missile 1,000 kilometers into central Russia to hit a target somewhere, you know the satellite didn't belong to Ukraine. You knew the guys lighting the fire on the missile were not Ukrainian soldiers. You're going to do what's reasonable, and you're going to attack the person who is attacking you. This is the demise of NATO, and it's the demise of the deep state because they just got too damn greedy.
So what is the next stage as you see it, Bob, if we're exiting? And I completely agree. We're in the sunset years of the empire, as we've been many times, and something new arises from the ashes, usually multipolarity for a couple generations.
No, stop right there. What happens tomorrow?
I don't know. Tomorrow.
October 22nd.
I don't know.
There's a new club.
My kid has soccer.
There's a new club in town called BRICS.
Is that the BRICS meeting? Yeah, of course. Sorry, of course. Yeah.
Okay. And here's what I'm saying. And I've seen a dozen reports of what people think they're going to come up with. And I think it will be financial in nature. But the fact is, we have no idea whatsoever. But I believe the BRICS meeting this week will be as significant as Bretton Woods was in 1944. I think it will be the biggest financial change in 80 years.
Why is that? Why this meeting?
Well, because the initial 4 BRICS countries looked at what the United States was doing, and it was a bully, and it was pushing everybody in the world around, and they said, this is crazy, we need to take responsibility for ourselves. And I had some numbers. There was a good report that came out today. 50% of the world's population, 40% of the economy, 30% of the oil belongs to the BRICS nation. And there are dozens of countries that want to join. What they have lacked so far was some kind of cohesive, rational financial system that it's de-dollarization. Now, it's not going to be the end of the dollar at all. However, the power that the United States has had since 1944, it's going to evaporate. Okay, we're not going to be able to push the rest of the world around. So the BRICS meeting, I mean, you've got all these things happening at the same time. And literally next 2 weeks, we could have civil war. We could have World War III on two fronts. We could have the BRICS agreement. We could have, let's talk about North Korea. North Korea is moving artillery to the border with South Korea. Holy shit. Mm-hmm. I didn't have enough black swans flying overhead. I needed one more. We're in a very dangerous period of time. And the biggest danger is we're not being led by mature adults. We're being led by a bunch of sociopaths who are quite bluntly fucking insane.
Now, the BRICS. Here, let me try. I enjoy steel manning, and just for the sake of providing devil's advocate counterpoints here. You could look at the BRICS surge and the flood of new countries raising their hands saying, we want to join. We're sending applications, and legitimate, powerful economy countries in many examples. But they're all very ideologically different from each other. And you got to wonder, what's the realistic cohesion eventually? And right now, there's one central bully to point the finger at. That's America. So it's easy to be aligned against that one thing. Yeah. But it's kind of like when, end of World War II, American and Russian soldiers fighting side by side because they knew the Nazis were the bad guy. But as soon as the bad guy was gone, these partners turned their guns at each other immediately. They were aligned against the big bully, but ideologically opposite. And as soon as that bully vanished, those ideologies bubbled to the surface real quick. Now, and so I always wonder that with the BRICS.
Now, you're a little bit wrong there. Patton wanted to continue to the east. Okay, it literally, before the war was over, there were people who wanted to keep fighting. We'll just turn around and we'll fight in the other direction. That's an extremely valid point. And I would like to point out that if you go back to the war crimes trials that were held after World War II, there was not a single Ukrainian Nazi brought up on charges. But if you look at the war crimes that took place, the worst war crimes in World War II took place on the Eastern Front. And there were tens of thousands of Poles and Russians and Jews who were literally taken out into the forest, shot in the head, and buried. And it was the Nazis who did it. But it wasn't the German Nazis, it was the Ukrainian Nazis. Okay? So we've got this bizarre situation where the birth of the war against Russia by NATO and the United States actually goes back to 1945. The United States has been attacking Russia in one form or another, literally since then. One of the things I loved about Canada, okay, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire on this. Do you remember when they had that meeting of the legislature in Canada, and they brought that Ukrainian soldier in and gave him a standing ovation because he had fought against the Russians in World War II? And I was thinking when I heard that, damn, didn't anybody think about the fact that if he was fighting against the Russians, he had to be fighting for the Germans? And nobody said that. And literally both sides, okay, we're giving this guy a standing ovation. He was a war criminal. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. There's a lot of I don't know, theories that flew around about how that occurred and why and what it meant and all this stuff. I mean, as I've hired former prime ministers to come speak at my conference, I know the security that's required to have a former prime minister in the room. You got to know a lot about everybody else in that room. It just says gross incompetence to me. That's all that meant to me. It was like, oh my goodness, this kind of stuff is occurring. There's no conspiracy. There's no hidden message. It was just an amazing example of how incompetent our current establishment is. Just mind blowing.
Look at the first assassination attempt on Trump.
Sure.
I mean, if you wrote a book or came up with a script for a movie, and people were as incompetent as the Secret Service and probably.
But Bob, that roof, to their credit, that roof was very steep. It's a steep roof.
It was 1.5 degrees. And when I heard that silly cow, came out and said, "No, that was far too dangerous."
Yeah.
That roof had a problem because the water tended to settle on the roof. It should have been a higher angle than it actually was. And I was thinking, I want to see how long it takes for this idiot to resign.
We talked about a lot of big threats today, and I want to give people some actionable insight, though. And so you're in France, I'm in Canada, but the conversation about a civil war in the United States is pretty serious. What do you do in this scenario, Bob? Like, what are some initial steps people could look to accomplish or execute in order to insulate themselves a little bit from the impending chaos?
It's one of those good news, bad news stories. How old are you?
I'm 40.
I'm 78. I don't have a problem. You got a problem.
Right.
That's a real good question. And the most honest answer is there is no answer. Okay. How do you win if World War III starts in a week? And the answer is you don't. How do you prepare? And the answer is pretty much you can't. People are starting to recognize that if and when Israel attacks Iran, you could see $200 a barrel oil. If Iran gets attacked, they will close the Gulf of Hormuz. We got a lot of black swans, and I'm not concerned about the black swans. I'm concerned about the lack of responsible leadership. Who in the world is actually looking out for his people? And the answer is damn few leaders. But you got to die at something. I think it's a rule.
What about Milei in Argentina? Would he be an exception to that?
I think the guy's a flim-flam.
What do you mean?
I don't think he's real. I think he sounds good, but there's too much of the preacher in him. I haven't seen, I grew up with JFK as president, with Eisenhower as president. And while they both made mistakes, clearly they were looking out for the best interests of the United States. And we've got a situation now where the Secretary of State is saying, oh, yeah, spending $250 billion on armaments, no big deal. 90% of the money comes back to us. I've been in a war. I had people try to kill me hundreds of times. I tried to kill people hundreds of times. I was not an armchair warrior. I was not a truck driver. I was not a supply clerk. I was not a Remington Raider. I was the guy getting shot at. And I will tell you, war is a bad idea. And who in the world is coming out and saying, we need to talk peace and we need to have some kind of mutual agreement and mutual security? We've got all these people talking about what a great idea. Let's go blow Russia up. Let's blow up Nord Stream, okay? A $30 billion act of domestic terrorism. And the Danish newspaper finally came out 2 years and a week after Nord Stream blew up and said, oh, by the way, the USS Kearsarge was overhead for a week just before the explosions. and the harbor master went out because they didn't have their transponders on, so they couldn't be identified. And the harbor master was told to go home and forget he had seen anything, and they would shut up for 2 years. We know who blew up Nord Stream, but the destruction of Nord Stream was the destruction of the German economy, and the head of Germany, Chancellor Scholz, was in Washington and approved it. These are the people who are leading the world. They're idiots. Look at the idiot you got up there in Canada. I never met a Canadian who liked him. Now, how the hell did this guy get into office when everybody in Canada hates his guts?
You know, timing. He came in at a time when we'd had Prime Minister Harper for 9 years and our economy was really good. You know, we came through the 2008 recession strong with a healthier balance sheet than any other G7 nation.
Well,
we had a prime minister who was
he fixed that.
No, he fixed that for sure. Yeah. I mean, they don't make
a number on that.
Yeah. Well, you know, exactly. But that's the thing. When times are really good, people vote poorly, I believe. And that's what happened. He got voted in because of his haircut. He was this young, fresh face, bringing a youthful energy to Canadian politics. That was all it was. There wasn't policy that got him voted in. It was the biggest criticism of Prime Minister Harper when he was in office was that he was boring. That was all the media could say about him. They said it a lot. They said they would slam him for being boring. Like, what a refreshing take on a world leader, by the way. He's boring. He just shuts up and does his job. Like, oh, man, hate that guy, right? But he actually ran a stimulus program in 2008, promised that he would keep it temporary, and he did. Put the budget into deficit, promised he would balance it, and he did. And that really cost him the election because no one likes the cuts that have to occur in order to balance a budget in deficit. But his team spent 2.5 years rebalancing, and it probably cost them the election, to be honest. But that's how he got elected. He was the new energy, the new energy face. And that's it.
Did I ever mention to you how Trudeau looks so much like Fidel Castro?
You haven't, but I've heard it a million times. Yeah. Let me be honest, though. I find that rhetoric to be dangerous because it distracts from the brutal truth that there's not some conspiracy. He's not some communist. Even if he is, it doesn't matter. The brutal truth is that he's grossly incompetent. That's the problem, right? And when I
obvious. Everybody in Canada knows it. I mean, I'm sitting here wondering. Let me give you an example. How many people in the United States have you ever heard try to justify bringing in 13 million illegal immigrants? You'd think somebody would say, that's a really great idea. Why don't we do that? But it happens anyway. You got this guy who is absolutely incompetent, and he's a pretty face, and there is nothing there, no substance whatsoever, and everybody hates his guts. And he says, "No, I'm a clutch on to power. You're going to have to kick me out of office."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's many powerful voices inside his own party that are calling for him to resign. The Liberal Party in the province that I live in, British Columbia, didn't run a single candidate. We just had a provincial election 2 days ago. The Liberal Party did not run any candidates. It came down to the Conservatives and the NDP. It ended up being the closest election in British Columbia history, which I think is just a real sign of the times because that's sort of the case everywhere right now. And it is what it is. But back to no presidents calling for peace. Just because you made that statement a couple minutes ago, there's no world leaders that are calling for peace. And just because I know I'm going to have some viewers in the comments saying Donald Trump is the no war candidate. He's the president who started no new wars in his tenure, and they're going to go to bat for him. So what do you have to say?
How many wars did he end?
Well, I mean, maybe he instigated the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Zero. Zero?
Didn't see it through. Yeah. Yeah.
Zero? Okay. You can't talk about one side of a coin without talking about the other side. Donald Trump is a lard-ass loudmouth, okay, who had some good policies. Now, were they all good? His border policy was actually effective. I cannot imagine any country that doesn't defend their borders. Now, let's go back to Europe. Let's talk about the migrants in Europe. Most of those migrants are a result of these constant wars that the United States and Israel started in the Middle East. So we've created this monstrosity with millions of illegal migrants coming into Europe, and they're destroying Europe, frankly. And this idea that they should be subsidized by the government, whatever came up from working for a living, earning your living, they're giving migrants in the United States lots of money. They just don't give money to the people who've had their homes lost in the hurricane. But they're given, God, I don't even know what the number is. They think it's $1,500 a month. They give them a credit card and a free phone and say, knock yourself out. And if that is not a military attack on somebody's part, okay, we haven't seen it yet. We've seen the Venezuela gangs take over Aurora. That's going to be 10 or 20 or 100 times worse. We're going to pay a price for those illegal immigrants, and it's going to be a giant price. Could Donald Trump end that? Not a chance. That's one of those things that's going to be exceptionally difficult to solve. They're not going to become Americans, and it's a question of how much damage they do to America before we do something. But in Europe, Europe has destroyed itself by bringing in the migrants.
So what do you make of J.D. Vance's plan to begin by stopping the inflow and getting tight border control back in place? And secondly, he stated that what they'll begin doing on day one is identifying all of the criminal record immigrants in the country and begin by deporting them outright and going through, as he says, like one bite at a time. We can actually resolve this with the worst offenders.
How are they going to do that? Okay, I give you a list of 1,000 criminal migrants. Okay, what are you going to do with them?
I mean, is your question, look, where are you going to send them?
Where are you going to find them?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
look, I mean,
sure.
Nobody's talked about this. You think we've got tracking anklets on them? Not a chance.
Apparently they have cell phones and credit cards.
There are tens of thousands of illegal criminal migrants in the United States. We have no idea of where they are. What happened in Aurora is just the first blast of the whistle. But, you know, Venezuela understands that we've been attacking them for years, so they cleared out their prison, sent them to the United States, and said, knock yourself out. That's just the start. That's not the end. And J.D. Vance is correct in saying we need to do something about it, but what nobody's thought about it is we don't even know where these people are.
Okay, so back to one of the statements you made at the opener of today's conversation. You said in more aggressive terms that if Trump is reelected, he'll effectively drain the swamp. But I think what you said is there'll be a handful of deep state actors and I think what you said was
I don't think he can.
Right. Okay, but I believe what you said was there'll be a handful of deep state actors and the Clintons, will be imprisoned or charged at least. Like action will be taken.
Right.
And maybe I interpreted that as like draining the really, really deep swamp. I don't know. But
here's the deal. That's taking a measuring cup to the cesspool and dumping it over your shoulder.
Okay.
What Hillary Clinton did in the Russian collusion hoax, and it was a hoax, was so illegal, and 51 intelligence professionals signed a document saying the Hunter Biden laptop had all the aspects of Russian disinformation. They knew the laptop was Hunter Biden's, okay? And strange enough, Zuckerberg bought the election in 2020. Nobody talks about this. I think the number was he donated $620 million, and that all went to a printing company to print out fake ballots. Okay, that was the most corrupt election in U.S. history, and everybody's pretending, oh, well, no, it wasn't that corrupt. Wait until you see the election 2 weeks from now. You know, wait until January 6th when Trump's gotten 98% of the vote and Kamala Harris said, gee, it's too bad. You know, we can't certify the election. We are in scary times, and the problem is we are being led by fools.
You know what? I hadn't, to be honest with you, Bob, I had never considered that was what would have to happen in a Trump victory, is that Kamala Harris would need to certify his victory. But of course, that's the scenario. That's how it unfolds. The vice president certifies. Huh. That's a hard one to wrap your mind around.
When you have U.S. House of Representatives like Raskin saying we will never certify the election, he's saying we will never have an honest election. And you were correct in one thing, I didn't mention it, but they literally, they're talking about running the United States for the next 2,000 years or until we blow it up. Elon Musk has come out and said there will never be an election after 2024. And he's absolutely correct.
Now, I've heard him say that in relation to a Democrat win.
Exactly.
Did he apply that more broadly? Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
He was talking about a Democrat election. He said it's so corrupt that if they get away with it. And I'm of mixed emotions. There was a really interesting number. I like to use numbers. Elon Musk had 6 million views to one of his speeches, and Kamala Harris had 150,000 views to one of her speeches. So this, like going back to 2016, all of the numbers indicated everybody hated Hillary Clinton and loved Donald Trump. And still, you know, look what happened. So I think, well, I'll go back to my original thesis. We're in for the most dangerous 2 weeks in world history.
Oh, come on. Where's the good news, Bob? You know, you you referenced the Roman Republic a few times, and it strikes me as very important history now because of how you could watch new precedent be set. And events occurred in the Roman Empire that at the time were like black swan events and unbelievable. And, you know, like kind of the maybe the era of like the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius, and I can't recall his brother's name, but this is sort of the first time political violence really became blatant and forthright. And you could have lived in that time and said things got really out of control. We'll get it together again. But what you see is that no, that was the opening of a new precedent, and now daggers in the forum was the regular thing. And that's more generally what these scenarios, when the barn door opens, it stays open, you know, and new precedent is set, which isn't a pleasant thought.
Entropy says as time passes, things become more chaotic. Time is always the enemy, and things get more chaotic. I'm really shocked by some of the things that I see and some of the things I hear. And it bothers me because sincerely, I believe it's going to get significantly worse quickly. Okay. I believe that Israel will attack Iran. I believe the potential for it going nuclear is very high. But at the same time, I recognize that the drone attack on Bibi Netanyahu was almost certainly a false flag. It's an excuse to attack Iran. So we'll go to war, have billions of people die based on a false flag.
If you look back long enough, the human experience is eventually a chart that goes up and to the right. And we've had many dark periods throughout our history, periods of war and oppression and empires crashing, et cetera, et cetera. We tend to find the green shoots, however. That would be my argument, is that as dark as things can get, over a long enough time horizon, what you see is extended lifespans, decreased infant mortality, safer cities, increased access to important medicine, decreased poverty on a global level. Good things. Do you think that's still the case, Bob?
Let's talk about the fourth turning. What we're going through is something that was absolutely predicted in the fourth turning. And the two authors said it would start somewhere between 2005 and 2010 and run for 20 or 25 years. And that would be the crisis stage. And that would be when, across the board, governments would be tending to totalitarianism. But what you were just talking about, the green shoots, in the fourth turning, everybody's forgotten this, they talk about there will be a resurgence of people who recognize there's problems and who want freedom. Now, the difference between all of the examples in history and today, and we've been through this hundreds of times, the difference between those hundreds of times and today was the tribes were not equipped with nuclear weapons 1,000 years ago. Okay, so you could go out and kill 10 or 15 or 20,000. You could not have something, if we have World War III, billions of people are going to die. And I believe that the oligarchs, okay, I think it's a global conflict between the oligarchs and the debt-based system of the West and a resource-based system of the East. Now, I would vote as many problems as there are with BRICS. I don't see mass insanity on the part of BRICS, and I do see mass insanity in the West. When Poland says, this giant next-door neighbor, okay, should be broken up into 100 pieces. What are you talking about? You're going to take on this sumo wrestler? I don't think so. Russia didn't start that war, but I can guarantee Russia is going to end that war. And Lithuania was talking about it's very important we make sure that Russia does not win this war. And I was thinking, Lithuania? I mean, you can't even find it on a map. They don't even make postage stamps because a postage stamp would be bigger than the country. But they're running their mouths about how they're going to kick Russia's butt. You're not going to kick Russia's butt. Napoleon couldn't do it. He was quite a general. Hitler couldn't do it. So you think that George Bush, or you think that Biden or Kamala Harris, you think they're going to do it? I don't think so.
Yeah, and we see that up here too, Bob, and I'm sure you've seen speeches from our prime minister yelling from the podium how we're not giving up until this war is won, and he's red in the face and he's shouting at the audience. And I watch this, Prime Minister of Canada, and it's like, who are you yelling at? Who are you representing right now? What are you talking about? Canada's a great country. It's a great place to move to if you want to be left alone, because there's a whole lot of land and very few people. More land than America, less people than California. Stay out of the metropolis, you get left alone. Why is our leader at the podium waving rattling the saber that we're leading this charge and we're not done until the war is won? And it's very confusing to me, and I don't understand it whatsoever. But I see it in Canada and all over the world.
Did I mention something about sociopaths? These people are crazy. I mean, they are certifiably insane. And I look at him, and he took a thriving economy and drove it straight into the ground. And quite bluntly, I think Canadians are exactly the same as Americans, except most of them are sane.
Well, it's got huge potential. That's what I'd say. I'm optimistic on Canada's future, but it's going to take, I think, a couple establishments to get us there, because all we need in office in Canada is a deal maker, somebody who understands their job at a federal level is just to clear the path. That's it. And let provinces conduct business how they want to. And if they want to squander their resources and turn away from global trade, like, okay, that's their prerogative, but give them the option, right? We've seen a lot of movements in Canada in the last couple of years led by the provinces who are fighting for their own sovereignty. Legislation like the Alberta Sovereignty Act or the Saskatchewan First Act.
Yeah.
And they're vilified in the media as separatist movements. And I've read them intimately. They're not. They're just provinces essentially saying we want our constitutional rights back, the ones in the Constitution, not additional, not looking for independence or separatist movements. It's just in the Constitution, the provinces are allowed to govern over the extraction and trade of their natural resources. And we've just seen increasing federal creep into the business of the provinces in a way that's just like unprecedented. And if Canadians can wake up to the mass resource wealth, I mean, it's a country laden in everything the world needs, and can be managed responsibly, and has been for many, many years. But it's a tricky one because BC, my province, just had the closest election in provincial history, but it went the wrong way, in my opinion. It did not go pro-business. The NDP won, the fine margin, but the NDP won, which is, our left-leaning party, right?
I think we're at peak insanity. Okay, you were talking about the media. I just saw something talking about the approval rating of the media in the United States, and it was something absurd, like 6% approval of the mainstream media, and Congress had a 8% approval rating, and Satan had a 12% approval rating.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise when you see the biggest media platform, literally the greatest of all time in terms of distribution numbers, in terms of monetary value of licensing deals, in terms of growth trajectory, is a combat sports commentator who is now the biggest media platform the world's ever seen in terms of distribution numbers.
Did I talk about peak insanity? Maybe I should have mentioned that.
Well, it makes sense because people are looking for anything else. They're like, there's got to be something better out there. And as a consequence, like, I don't know, a sort of semi-regular guy, right?
Yeah.
Comedian, sports commentator, likes to go deep in long-form conversations, has just ballooned in popularity because he's providing something that people can't find anywhere else.
Right.
And that is a very realistic sign of the times. Yeah. Look, Bob, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's always great chatting with you. It's always good to catch up. You make me a little bit depressed, but I power through. It's okay.
You need to remember the last line of a movie from the 1930s when Scarlett O'Hara said, tomorrow is another day.
I like it.
Yep.
I like it. Okay. Look, before I let you go, is there any possibility I could get you out to Vancouver on January 19th and 20th? We got the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference.
Well, there's
What do
two
you think?
chances.
There's 2 chances.
Yeah.
Okay.
One's slim,
What are
the
they?
other's none. I would love to. And, we hadn't even bothered talking about resources. Jesus, we got the highest price for gold in history. We've got silver breaking out. We've got a lot of mining projects that are up 5 or 10% today. There's a lot of things that in any normal situation we would be cheering. And instead, we have to worry about whether World War III is going to start tomorrow or whether it's going to start Wednesday.
Well, look, you guys in the comments, let me know if Bob should come back on ASAP for a talk specifically on the resource business, on precious metals, commodities, mining equities. Look, if things are going to get pretty tough, it's important to make some money first. And so if you want to hear that part too, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can strangle Bob into coming back. And I'm going to take that slim chance. I'm going to keep pressing.
Super
Get
deal.
to Vancouver in January. Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks, Bob. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks, sir.